Hello and welcome back to Deep Drive, your weekly podcast powered by Kotak Mahindra Prime. Now, on this week's episode, we are going to be talking about a company not known for auto but diving into the auto space. It is JSW. Now, JSW have got big plans, and that's what we're going to be talking about on this episode. I'm Hormazd Sorabjee.
Hi, I'm Ketan Thakkar. Yes, Hormazd, a massive $10 billion commitment from the JSW Group in the automotive space. It first started with MG Motor India. Both of us were there. And now wanting to go on its own. So really, Mr. Jindal, Sajan Jindal, is very ambitious about the automotive space. I saw the speech in 2023 and, it was quite infectious at that point in time. The passion was very visible. I'd like to get to know from you, Hormaz. You've seen many brands entering the Indian market, many brands also eating a humble pie and had to exit. For a infrastructure group like JSW, wanting to get into a highly competitive space, what's your initial assessment?
Well, as it starts with the promoters. I think Sajan Jindal, he's actually passionate about cars. He genuinely loves cars. And I think the little I've met him and what people have met him, they're quite astonished as to how quickly he's understood the car business.
Fantastic.
Very sharp mind, phenomenal with numbers. Jindal Steel is what it is because of what he has done. He's got his son Parth now also involved, so it's a young blood over there. But I think really it is Sajan Jindal himself who's really the driving force behind this and has huge ambition. I think what's interesting also is that, I think in the four-wheeler space or the passenger vehicle space, this is the first really promoter-driven, promoter-led, let's say, company that we are seeing. I'm talking about, I think we need to specify what the JSW Group is. You've got JSW MG and you've got JSW Motors, both completely different under different verticals.
That's right.
So, but again, I think the common, let's say, stakeholder here is JSW and promoter driven. We've seen it does make a difference. We've seen it in the two-wheeler space.
Absolutely.
Take Hero, Bajaj, TVS, all absolutely driven by
Royal Enfield.
Eicher, Royal Enfield, of course. How can we forget? Driven by promoters, and led by promoters. In the four-wheeler space, you've got Mahindra and Tata promoters mainly at the board level, not operational, run by professionals.
Yes.
Of course, doing very, very well. But again, at some point, they were all led by promoters as well. But they've reached this stage and evolution and are more professionally run right now. So I think that is going to be, change the game a bit.
Yes.
Because I think what's going to come with this is commitment to long-term capital. They will have patience, let's say continuity of leadership for a long time. Of course, there are challenges as well. Internal dissent is usually doesn't happen.
Right.
But I think for me, it's quite refreshing that we've got a promoter-led organization now in the four-wheeler space.
Absolutely. Right. I think you often spoken about this fact that you got to pay that entry ticket price. At least here in this group, you really do not see that as a challenge. And whatever little conversation that I've had with the friends in the ecosystem, clearly money is not an issue at all. And they're looking big.
Yeah, Ketan, really $10 billion, as you said, you can see that money is not going to be an issue, deep pockets. But where I think might be a slight disconnect is really the steel industry where they're coming from, which is their core. Very high scale, B2B, very structured in a certain way. And getting into cars, a completely different ballgame altogether. Very, very complex, very high tech. So, Ketan, while, deep pockets, let's say a commitment to spend big, we know what they're investing in terms of capacity. I hear it's 500,000 going up to 1 million. That's going to require a lot of capital. But I think the one area where I see a big kind of a difference between, let's say, steel, where they're used to, and auto, is with people capital. And I think that is really very, very important right now because clearly you need the top talent. And I think compensation benchmarks are very different between steel and auto, because I think in auto the benchmarks are set by global OEMs.
Absolutely.
So much, much higher. So I think they need to have this mindset and appetite to pay
A little bit more.
a little bit more, because I think, it's very expensive. Whether you get designers, top the designers, the best designers in the world cost a lot. People who know about software defined vehicles, product planners, all this is very, very expensive. So I think this is going to be key, that, other than investing in capital, I think JSW has to be prepared to invest big in the people as well.
Your performance is as good as the team that you have, isn't it, Hormaz? And we've seen it often in the automotive space that good talent is actually what drives the sales out in the market.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, the best example right now is Mahindra and Mahindra. We've seen it. I think it's, just the leadership there is probably the best there is in any auto company right now. And we are seeing the results.
Absolutely. And the other aspects of entering into the automotive space, Hormaz, is tech, something that, you keep speaking very often about how critical tech is for one to establish oneself and then grow from that. And second is building the brand. It's not easy. I mean, we've had some of the biggest global brands in India, but it has taken them decades to kind of find that resonance with the Indian buyer. So two critical aspects here, Hormuz: brand building for a B2B brand to carve out a space for themselves in the consumer space. And second is the technology and the technology depth. While the first step was taken with MG Motor by acquiring stake there, the second one is going to be on their own, but with the technology borrowed from China, the big China factor here. How do you see that playing out?
Well, look, on the brand, obviously JSW, not a known brand. But I think for me, that's really not a big issue, because we've seen that, to me, it's more product drives the brand than brand driving the product.
True that.
So I think, coming then to the product and the technology, absolutely important, because really it's a technology and the product is the core of the organization.
Absolutely.
And we've seen that, you need control of that. I think obviously a very smart move to go to where the future of mobility is.
Absolutely.
New energy vehicles, China is leading the way. And I think clearly what we've seen, which we'll get into the products, I mean, the first play was to take a big stake in MG Motor India. And then, of course, to set up its own subsidiary, 100% subsidiary, again, talking to Chery and others as well. I believe Geely as well, conversations are going on. Even commercial vehicles they're looking at.
JSW.
That's right. So I think, but again, let's talk about, going with a company like Chery. Fantastic portfolio of products. Even MG through SAIC, fantastic portfolio of products. So I think makes a lot of sense. But, a challenge I feel with, going down the China route, it's actually a bit of a double-edged sword, is because, there are geopolitical issues, and China of late, in a way, has weaponized its resources and technology, in the sense it's not letting go of it so easily. And what I understand, even with, Chery, the license agreement, I think it's took time to come. And I think right now, the only thing they've kind of, let's say, licensed out is the body on white for vehicles like the Jetour T2. I think other components, or the critical components like the software, the infotainment system, I don't think they've got the data for that as yet. So those bits will have to be imported. So I think it's a challenge of, maybe it's not necessarily the Chinese OEM, but it might be policy from China that, they want to control the amount of tech that's going out. Don't forget, for decades, they got all the tech in from a lot of the Western companies through their joint ventures.
Right.
Now they are absolutely masters of it. So this could be a bit of a challenge. But I think clearly, the tech Chinese brands offer right now is the way of the future.
Now, it's a very critical factor, Hormuz. I think that the mobility has shifted to east from west. And everyone talks about China's speed right now. It's one thing to bring in Chinese products and at speed but it's another to kind of establish them in the Indian market. Sometimes we've seen people taking ages to establish a brand in the marketplace. While, to me, I think they're trying to do way too many things together. Uh, Sometimes it's too good to be true to believe that, they want to do trucks, they want to do cars, they want to do actually house of brands wherein they can have multiple platform, multiple brands. In fact, at the unveil in 2023, 2024, there was a vision put out of selling 1 million electrified vehicle by the end of the decade. 3 years have gone, and we've seen what has happened. MG Motor is still at about 50,000 units. So, the fear is, while the aspiration is to kind of, go at speed and have big ambitions. But it is a very, very difficult market, Hormaz. And you got to, along with the tech, you also need to spend time, and you got to have that stomach and be patient to establish a product and a brand to find that resonance with the Indian buyer. What do you think? I mean, do you think the time, while it is shrinking world over, that it's going to be a difficult pace for them to operate in?
No, that's a very interesting point you brought, Ketan, because, let's talk about speed. I think the one thing that frustrates Mr. Jindal, and, again, being a bit of an outsider, as you get a fresh thinking, is that the auto industry is too linear.
Right.
It doesn't move fast enough. And, so I think one of the reasons also he is looking for talent outside the auto industry is to try and bring this kind of non-linear thinking. But to be honest, it's easier said than done, because the auto industry, by nature, it's been engineered to avoid failure rather than promote experimentation and move faster.
Right.
So it's a very, very challenging industry.
Absolutely.
Don't forget that, it's hugely safety related. It's hugely regulation related. And all these factors naturally slow it down because the validation life cycles are tremendous.
Absolutely.
So, there's a limit to how fast you can go. Of course, I'm sure you can go a bit faster. But, I think there are some really good examples of speed versus quality. I think you've got to balance the two, because they do come at a cost, if you trade one off on the other. So to me, we have great examples already in the Indian market.
Yeah.
On one side is Ola.
Yeah.
You've got to hand it for him. Phenomenal speed. Got into the market really fast, set up his factory in super quick time. And we've seen what's happened to Ola today.
Yeah.
Absolute disaster.
Yeah.
Not a semblance. He had actually contempt for quality.
Yeah.
Bhavish Agarwal literally didn't care for his customer. The kind of contempt he had for quality or validation processes, just trying to ram it out in the market as quickly as possible. On the other extreme, you have a company like Maruti Suzuki.
Yeah.
Taken a lot of time with the e-Vitara.
Yeah.
But you know that when Maruti takes its time, it's to perfect the product.
Absolutely.
Somewhere a notch down, you've got companies like Tata and Mahindra, which got their EVs out much faster, but they had those original glitches. That's something which companies like Maruti Suzuki, Toyota, of course, they're both together with the same product.
Yeah.
They've come quite late.
Yeah.
We know even Maruti, there were delays,
Yeah.
6-month delays.
Yeah.
But finally, when it's out in the market, whether the product's good or bad, that's a separate thing. But one thing I think I can be assured of, without even people buying it, is that, I have the confidence that their products will be absolutely safe. So I think, you've got to balance all these factors out. It's great wanting to be fast, great wanting to be non-linear, but far easier said than done.
Right. I'm sorry, Hormazd, I segued into the time part of it, the technology part and the China part. At Autocar, we've broken some stories about the products that are going to come out. You have some insight into the future at JSW Motor. The initial sense that I get is they're going to be playing above 15-20 lakh, and in that white space where options are limited, 20 to 50 lakh space, we have some models in sight. What is it that we have for our viewers to understand?
Well, so I think JSW is in a unique position. Two companies, and it's not unique elsewhere in the world. You've got these mega groups which have different brands under different umbrellas, different entities altogether. And I think so that's what JSW is hoping to do. So let's start actually with JSW MG, which is the existing joint venture right now. It's been around for a while. Again, it's got a huge, let's say, lineup of products, doing very well with the Windsor, which has been the best-selling EV for a while. Though of course, that's getting competition, and they know that. So I think they're going to be launching an all-new seven-seater plug-in hybrid, and which also has EV capability, full EV. So I think it's called the Starlight.
Yes, that's what it is called in the Chinese market.
Yeah.
F-150 is a platform.
That's right. Yeah. So might get a different name over here. So a seven-seater, bigger than the Hector SUV being planned. Then I think we've got the IM6, which again is an SUV for the Select brand.
Right.
Again, maybe under 60 lakhs. That again, MG Select actually doing quite well. All small numbers, but really doing well in their segments. I mean, Cybersteer numbers are great for a sports car. The M9 also doing really well. And I think going forward, might even be looking at a new platform to replace some of the products that not worked. Like MG Aster clearly didn't work.
Absolutely.
Classic example of bringing a product designed for Europe into India. Too expensive, just didn't resonate with Indian customers. But I think there's going to be an all-new platform from which I understand it'll be future-proofed for, let's say, ICE, EV,
that's right,
hybrids as well. I mean, Aster, we had the ZS EV, which came off that.
Right.
But again, I think, these products have lived beyond their life cycles now.
I agree.
I think the new platform coming, isn't it?
Yes, Hormazd. I think, Sigma is the architecture's name. Potentially, that is one of the alternatives for the B and B plus segment that they have. And it is multi-fuel. That's the direction that the group has taken. New energy. So it's got to have the hybrid capability as well as pure EV. So clearly, I mean, Creta rival was what they were banking on with Aster, but unfortunately did not take off. They want to get it right this time around. It's a new gen architecture and future-proof for different powertrains. So it appears that next time around, they're going to come out a lot more stronger. It was the first vehicle with the SDV capability in the Indian market, and they're going to further take the tech element into that platform. So Sigma is the architecture, Hormazd. That is going to be one of the biggest bet from MG Motor before they actually go in for an IPO, which was a thought process when JSW Motor actually picked up the stake in the company. So yeah, I mean, they've just got the Magister, the D segment, then the Starlight, the C segment, then they address the B segment, and plus the existing Windsor and Comet are doing fairly good numbers. This year they're talking about 99,000 units kind of a product in volume.
So absolutely, just with MG JSW, I think, a lot of potential there. They've got decent scale, definitely company to watch out for. Again, I think there's one little complication there. That's the VW angle.
Yes.
Which SAIC and VW have a good equation. So that has not been resolved there. But I wouldn't be surprised if you just saw some, let's say, badge engineered products as a quick fix to get, the companies associated in that way. There's no equity involvement. It's a very clean business deal. Which could be done.
It's going to be critical. I mean, for CAFE, eventually companies are going to need some part of an EV as
exactly. So for me, I don't know whether it would happen, but I mean, if Volkswagen, needs an EV desperately, why don't you just badge engineer a Windsor, for example?
Why not? Yeah.
That could be one way out of it.
Absolutely.
So I think, because they desperately need to meet the CAFE numbers, Volkswagen, they're relying a lot on something happening with MG and SAIC. Nothing's happened yet. I think it's very complicated to put a big joint venture or association or partnership. I think a much easier way would be is to kind of pay MG to kind of
and source
vehicles from there. Whether Volkswagen would let that happen, whether consumers would accept that, it's literally almost blasphemous. But don't forget, there's a strong equation in any case. I mean, you've got Volkswagen China developing a lot of products in conjunction with their partners over there. So I think it's not totally impossible at all.
Right.
But I think so. Really, JSW MG, I think, on a pretty strong footing as far as, let's say, products are concerned. And of course, you've got people there. You've got Anurag, who's an old veteran. I think Rajiv Mehta from Mahindra is there as well.
Right.
So I think, old guys.
Vinay Raina from Ford has joined as well.
Vinay Raina from Ford is also there. So I think they are pretty sorted in that way. I think, honestly, I'll be frank, what Rajiv Chhabra had achieved and, the level it was at, it's dropped in between. Now I think it's time to, pick up with these products. I think they have the opportunity to really kind of, go past their the volumes that they're currently doing.
There's a different sense of energy there when you meet them now. There's different kind of confidence. Windsor doing 50,000 units per annum. The Magister, they've kind of made it bigger and better. And there's a cadence of portfolio lined up now. So there's a lot more for JSW MG to do. The capacity is going to be increased from 100,000 to 300,000. So I think that part of MG Motor for the JSW Group is sorted. The tripartite part, little complicated, as you mentioned, Hormazd, may get sorted out. If not JV, then probably some kind of a product sharing agreement. Then there is a big one, which I'm very curious to know about from your end, the JSW Motors' own endeavor with Shrey.
That, as I said, is a big bet. We talked about it earlier. Very, very ambitious. One thing you got to hand it to, the Jindas, they're not short on ambition. They are thinking very big, which of course I think, the promoters can do. And that's one advantage of, these companies being promoter-led or this one being promoter-led. So I think here we've talked about the products. We broke the story first that the first one out is going to be from Shrey, the Jetour T2. A big, let's say, SUV, it's like a lot of people call it, let's say a Chinese Defender. But clearly I think what we're getting here,
presence.
Super road presence, phenomenal power, 370 horsepower.
Insane.
Which is going to be insane, plug-in hybrid. So I think super spec, you see them all over Dubai. And they're just all over the place. So I think has a lot of potential. Pricing will be key. I think that's going to be quite expensive in the 40 lakh range. So I think clearly a good strategy to come in at the top. Kind of establish the brand with a pretty high-tech product, a premium product. So that makes a lot of sense. And then I think going down, they'll have something called the iCar, the V23. Again, we've broken that story on Autocar. So kind of a electric Jimny, so to speak. So I think that's also going to be in the mix. And they've got a Creta Fighter, which is again a Shrey-based Jayco J5. So that's where, so I think a whole host of products there as well. And it's not stopping at Shrey. They are going to be talking to Geely and others. So literally, shopping around. But of course, I think everything right now from China, which makes a lot of sense. And obviously, they've established, let's say, relationships with the Chinese OEMs, with the Chinese ecosystem. But as I said, they always risk to that, just given the whole geopolitical situation right now. But clearly, I think it's, going there is the thing to do because that's where the tech is for future mobility.
Absolutely, Hormazd. In fact, we've already seen Tatas and Mahindras actually taking inspiration from East rather than West, and their life cycles are changing. And naturally, for a newbie like JSW Motor, that's the place to be. And it's going to be interesting. I think the price bracket should be what, 20 to 50 lakh in your assessment, Hormazd, the JSW brand?
Yeah, I think 50 is on the higher side. I think they'll play between 20 and 40 lakhs, somewhere over there.
Interesting space to be, isn't it?
Yeah, interesting space to be, absolutely.
Very limited options there.
Yeah, correct. But a lot of challenges, Ketan. For one, you need a really, really strong team for this because you're really building everything from scratch, from the engineering, product development, retail, service network, all that. It's a very, very complex game. So I think that's going to be absolutely key. And, from what I understand, there's really not too many people from the auto business in this. But that's more by design, actually, because as I said, the thinking in JSW is that auto is too linear. But, I think you can't rush things the way you want to. It's just that, as I said, this business, is a slow-paced business. And the more you try and push that, you do make certain compromises.
Absolutely.
One of them being quality above everything.
Absolutely.
So, but I think the ambition is there and the thought process is there. A very fresh thought process. So I think it's going to be quite interesting to see how this plans out. I think even the products chosen are really very promising.
Absolutely. In fact, Anurag, in a recent interview, was mentioning, there's deluge of alternatives available from what we can pick from the Chinese market. But the picking the right product is critical, and saying no to things is very critical. And hence, bringing in products that resonates with the Indian audience is very critical. You mentioned about Aster as to how it was designed for Europe but brought into India. I think that's going to be another critical element from JSW Motor side. Ever since they've announced their plans, Hormaz, I've been wanting to understand as to how are they going to go about localizing it. So the first announcement of setting up a massive factory in Aurangabad, that showed that there's commitment coming.
Right.
Now I understand there are a lot of people being hired on the R&D front. While the initial phase there may be a lot of assembly that will happen, but it appears that they're going to be hiring a lot of local talent. Almost 100 odd engineers have already been hired. They want to take it up to 1,500 to 2,000 people. Like capital is not a constraint, so probably there may be a tech center coming up in Pune. So yes, time to market is critical, and they in a hurry to bring in the brand into the Indian market. But there appears to be a plan to localize it, and there's a certain template that MG Motor has also defined with the Windsor. It came with circuits, eventually localized. Now the localization level has tripled. It is adding to the bottom line. So a similar template for actually JSW Motor to follow. And in this market, wherein very few brands have succeeded, they actually have a proof point of MG Motor, a new brand, can actually succeed in the Indian market. So I think the localization is going to be a critical element, and designing the product for the Indian market as well is going to be critical, isn't it, Urvash?
Absolutely, it is. I think that is their ambition. I think the absolute ambition was to get the platform and even design their own top hat.
Oh, okay.
That's what they wanted to do. But I think, there have been constraints in how much data they've been able to get from, their Chinese partners.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of, can be a little restrictive, but I'm sure they'll get around that. There'll be, ways to work out. So I think it'll be a step-by-step way. I think initially will be just CKD.
Yeah.
Right now, just assembly and, put the products out there. Seed the market well. One assumes they will be successful because, I think they've been well-chosen products. And then slowly localize and build expertise. So I think, as a kind of a, let's say, on paper strategy, it's brilliant. Absolutely. But, to execute this, as I said, the key is going to be the people to be able to execute this, in a way that, this market demands. Absolutely. Because it's a very brutal market, very unforgiving. Yeah. And we've seen that, 4 players dominate about 80% of it. But they will have a few cards up their sleeve, like, let's say, a lot more vertical integration.
Another interesting element of that vertical integration is also the battery localization, Hormaz. And that's something that Parth Jindal had mentioned when the JSW partnership was announced. So clearly, that's going to be another interesting area wherein we don't have tech yet. And even today, people are relying a lot on Chinese cells. So it'll be very interesting to see as to how the group goes about localizing cells, because powertrain is going to be critical. Yes, you can rely on imports to begin with, but eventually the cell is going to be another critical aspect. So I think as a group, what I see, Hormaz, is that there's, we've often seen many brands falling in the Indian market because of the scale challenge. And what they are trying to do is adopt a very unique approach. Have MG Motor as one brand, have JSW brand as another. They want to do trucks. They are talking to multiple companies like you mentioned, Geely and others. Probably have a house of brand and have that vertical integration at the back with the steel, with paint, with there's JSW Energy as well. So from a power supply perspective, so I think on the paper it appears very promising.
Yeah, it looks all great on paper, Ketan, but of course, huge challenges. This is a business where you need deep experience and expertise. And you talked on vertical integration of the batteries, but if you see, I think, again, to get the kind of, let's say, tech transfer on battery manufacturing, to set up a battery manufacturing plant, you'll require a lot of know-how from China. And that, I think, is hard to come by. I mean, yes, if you look at it, at the end, manufacturing down to the cell level, localization down to the cell level is the, the critical and the final step. But no one's done it as yet.
Absolutely.
So I think, there's obviously, these are not kind of, let's say, easy kind of things to do, highly complex. And again, I keep coming back, dependency on Chinese always is something to, worry about.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But I think what's clear is that, it's a phenomenal rush of fresh air into this segment with JSW coming in, a completely new player.
Yeah.
Again, promoter led, which has its own dynamics and makes it very interesting.
Indeed.
And I think, if things work out, they should be a formidable force.
I agree, Hormazd. I think a new path by a new Indian entrepreneur is what I'm looking forward to.
Absolutely. And with that, we'll call it quits on this edition of Deep Drive. Hope you did enjoy watching it. You can tune into us every Saturday at 11 a.m. as always. And you can also catch us on our other platforms, Apple Podcast and Spotify. Thanks for watching. See you again, same time next week.